Does this hat look stupid? If I take the hat off, is my hair messed up? We're doing the hat. Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mary, and today's video is going to be my December 2020 wrap up. December was actually a pretty bad reading month for me. Looking at my numbers, it's not like terrible, but December is the second month in a row I didn't finish my TBR. So if you watched my December TBR, I didn't finish all those books. Spoiler alert. I did end up doing like my own 24-hour readathon thing by myself. And I tried to vlog it and then just sort of fell off vlogging, so it wasn't going to be very interesting, so I'm not posting that video. I deleted all the footage, but I did manage to finish several more books, and I did that so that I could bolster my team I did the Reindeer Readathon, which was started by Eric at Break Even Books. I'll have his channel linked down below, and it's a competition readathon that he does every December, where you get assigned to a team, and you get points based on the prompts that you fulfill. And my team won, so yay, Team Snowflake, good job, guys. Without further ado, I'm going to start with my stats. Like I mentioned in my goals video, I'm trying to do more consistent stats, but I don't know if these are consistent with the other months of 2020. Just because I didn't really keep track of what stats I was keeping. So in my bullet journal for 2021, I should have more consistent stats starting with my January wrap up, but we're gonna start here. I did read 11 books in December. I read from 9 female and 2 male authors. 2 of the books that I read were from the same author, and she is an Asian woman. I also read from 6 white authors and 5 BIPOC authors, which is pretty good. It's like 50, it's almost 50-50, but again, 2 of those BIPOC authors that I counted were the same woman. So just bear in mind, I guess. I read 3,505 pages. I read 0 1-star books, 2 2-star books, 2 3-star books, 6 4-star books, and 1 5-star book, which is not bad. I don't know what that averages out to. I usually do the average. So 4 plus 6 is 10. Plus, what's 6 times 4? 24? Yeah, that's right. I'm proud of myself. So that's an average of 3.5 stars, which isn't bad. I think that's about consistent with my normal averages. I think normally I just don't have very many 1 or 2 stars. I have a lot of 3 stars, but it is what it is. Is that right, Murph? Is it what it is? He's sitting right behind the camera on the couch, and I want him to stay there because it's very cute, but if I acknowledge him too much, then he'll come run over here and try to hang out with me. And that's really annoying, so I'm gonna try to not do that. Genre-wise, I read 1 mystery thriller, 1 horror, 4 fantasy, 0 sci-fi, 2 romance/contemporary, 1 nonfiction, 1 historical fiction, and 1 general fiction. And I didn't do my demographic breakdown, but I want to say I read 3 YA, and everything else was adult. I did read 1 collection of short stories, but we'll get to that. Without further ado, I'm just going to get into the books that I read in December. So the first book that I finished in December was Give Me Your Hand by Megan Abbott. This is a mystery thriller about a woman named Kit who works in a lab, and she's trying to get on... I really hope you can't hear my dog licking his pillow behind you. Can you stop licking that? But yes, Give Me Your Hand follows Kit, who is vying for this promotion in the lab that she works in, and there's only a certain number of slots, and so she thinks maybe she'll get one of them. She's the only woman working in this lab, besides her boss, who is a female doctor as well. I think they're chemists. And suddenly a girl from Kit's past comes and gets hired into the lab, and she is competing with Kit. Or she's competing against Kit and also everyone else in the lab for this position. And so it's like a thriller mystery based on that. And these 2 women have a history together. They went to high school together. And so something happened when they went to high school that's like supposed to be a big secret, but it gets revealed kind of early on. I won't tell you what it is, but the whole premise of the book is that it follows these dual timelines of what happened with Kit and this girl when they were in high school, and then sort of their lives now, and how that like secret that they share is like infecting their lives, I guess. I liked parts of this book and I didn't like parts of this book. I gave this book 3 stars. I thought it was fine. I didn't really understand why the mystery sort of thing that was supposed to be the big... It felt like what was supposed to be the big reveal was revealed right at the beginning of the book, which was kind of confusing to me. But also I'm glad that it was, because if it hadn't been revealed until later, I called it like right away. And then there's like something sort of more hidden in that mystery, which I also sort of figured out early on. Ultimately, this book felt anticlimactic to me, but I did enjoy certain things about it. So I really liked the way that the author portrayed the men in the lab and how they acted towards Kit and the other girl whose name I can't remember. I'm sorry. I'm really bad at character names. So if you're new here and that bothers you, I'm sorry. The microaggressions towards the women and like the little sexist comments here and there. I liked the way that was portrayed and how like difficult it seemed to be a woman in a lab and how it was very much portrayed as a boys club, and they kept being like, well, there can only be one woman on the team, and they didn't seem to have a problem when there were 6 men on this one team, but they were like, well, more than one woman isn't really fair. And so it was really interesting, that sort of dynamic that they had. I also really liked, this book had a very good tone. Like for mystery thriller tones, I thought this worked really well. It made me very uneasy. A lot of things were happening and I wasn't really clear on what was going on, so I was feeling very like anxious while reading it. Which I enjoy in a mystery thriller. That's kind of one of the main things that I look for. That said, I didn't really get the character motivations for a lot of her reactions. So we're in Kit's head and things happen, and so you would think that she would be able to explain, because we're in her head, the thought process, but we don't really get anything explained to us. She just sort of reacts in a way, and her reactions oftentimes didn't really make sense to me, and I didn't really, like, I didn't buy into why this disastrous mystery secret thing. I didn't see why it was as big of a deal as it was meant to be in the book. That said, I think this book was fine. If you like books that at the end the author explains everything and ties everything up together, which I really do, I think you would like this as well. The author did a really good job of, at the end, sort of explaining her motivation for everything that was going on. The other thing that I didn't like in this book, though, is the author relied on the amnesia trope a little bit. So there's a scene where Kit goes out with one of her coworkers and gets drunk, and then something happens. She like says something, or she's not sure. So a lot of the tension that the book has is based on, did she or did she not say something she shouldn't have said? I don't know. That's just a trope that I don't really enjoy. Read that for Sorry, and that was for the prompt to read a mystery. The second book that I read in December was I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid, who, by the way, his brother-in-law is the president of Iceland, and his sister is the like first lady of Iceland, which is really interesting. I found that out when I was looking up to see whether he was like white or whatever. But I gave I'm Thinking of Ending Things 4 stars. It's like a 4.5 star for me. It's not quite a 5 star because I still agree with some things that I said in my original review. I'll link that video somewhere for you. I did a book/movie comparison review of I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and I want to keep this vague because I feel like the joy of I'm Thinking of Ending Things is not knowing what's going to happen. And so it's about a couple who is in the car going to the boyfriend's house and you're inside of her head and she's thinking about whether or not she wants to break up with him. And that's basically the book. It's very atmospheric because you're in this car on this snowy night, and then all sorts of creepy things happen when you get to his parents' house, and it's a very creepy book. The atmosphere is great for a horror. I love it. I think it's great for this time of year as well, especially if you live somewhere cold. But yes, I did give this 4.5 stars. I thought it was really, really good. If you like creepy atmospheric horror, I would say this is definitely a good one. But I'm Thinking of Ending Things, I read my Sorry prompt to read a horror book, and I read for the Reindeer Readathon to read a book with internal conflict. The third book that I read in December was The Winter of the Witch by Katherine Arden. This is the third book in the Winter Night trilogy, which is a fantasy series based in medieval Russia. And so it follows the transition, I guess, of Russian society from pagan religion to Christianity, and like the introduction of Christianity into smaller towns in Russia, and sort of what that does to those communities, which was really interesting. These books are really well researched, which is something that I really appreciate. A lot of the things, like the big events, I guess, that happen in this book, that the book sort of centers around, are real things that happened. Which I didn't know until I read the author's note of the second book, and then I read the author's note of the third book too, and she like talks about why she framed the narrative in certain ways because she wanted them to line up with these events. So I'm not a history buff, so I don't know how accurate that is, but I thought that was really, really interesting and very, very cool. I also really enjoyed that in this book, Vasya gets to grow up and like, I don't know, I didn't like Vasya as much in the first book, or I didn't like her circumstances as much, I guess. I'm sort of beginning to realize that's what it was, but I feel like her character development is so good. And if you don't really enjoy the first book, like I think I gave the first book 3 stars, I gave this one 4 stars, and I want to say I gave the second one 3 or 4 stars as well. But my enjoyment in the books increasingly got more, if that makes sense. When I started the third book, I thought it would be a 5-star read because I loved the first half of it so much. And then the second half of it has a lot of like battle/fight scenes, which isn't something that I really like reading about. So that sort of bored me, I guess. That sounds bad. It wasn't like boring. It's just not what I'm super interested in. It wasn't like a perfect read, but this was a really good conclusion to that trilogy. So If you like an atmospheric, like, fantasy series that has, like, if you like the gods among men trope and stuff like that, I think you would really enjoy this book. And if you like books that sort of read like fairy tale or have like a lot of basis in like myth and folklore, I think this is a good series for you to read. I'm indicating to my laptop. I don't really know why. The Winter of the Witch I read for Sorry to read a retelling because it's a retelling of Russian folklore. And for the Reindeer Readathon, it was to read a sequel/companion novel. Finally, a book that I can show you. The fourth book that I read was Orange World by Karen Russell. This is a collection of short stories. These are all like fantastical short stories. Yeah, I gave this 3 stars. I thought this was fine. I didn't love any of the stories. For Sorry, this was an author that I've never read from before. And for Reindeer Readathon, it was to read a book with a fox on the cover. And there's a fox in a cradle. So this is what I read for that. There's nothing wrong with this collection of short stories, but none of the short stories really spoke to me as much as I've read short stories that can. So yeah, while I really liked the vibe in a lot of these, I didn't love any of these individually. And it just, overall, like, most of this I thought was fine. It's like kind of weird, kind of kooky, but none of it was like really great or like my kind of short story. It was very like fine. I was happy to read them when I read them, but I'll never return to them, if that makes sense. Then I read Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi. I read this for Sorry to read a retelling because I thought it was going to be like a Hansel and Gretel retelling kind of, and it's not. I ended up giving this book 2 stars. I didn't get it. I didn't really enjoy it. I thought it was too weird. I've heard a lot of people say that they didn't like their first read, but once they knew what to expect, the second time they read it, they liked it better. So if I'm in the mood to reread it at some point, I might. But Helen Oyeyemi is a Black British woman living in Prague now, but it's about like the immigrant experience kind of, I think, but also the family in it immigrates from a country that no longer exists. So I think there's a lot to unpack and like, it has a lot of merit. I also listened to this as an audiobook, which I think kind of affected my ability to really understand what was going on. But I want to read some positive reviews of it and some like critiques of it and then maybe reread it at some point. But for now, it didn't work for me. I didn't really enjoy it. I thought it was too weird and confusing, and so much of it happens like she's asleep and it's a dream, and then she wakes up and it's not a dream, and then the gingerbread, I don't know. I can't even like give you a description of what happened because I honestly don't know. But I do think overall it was trying to tackle coming to terms with being an outsider in a place and not belonging in your homeland anymore and not belonging in your new home, and just like the displacement that immigrants feel. I just didn't like the way that the story was told, if that makes sense. Then I read The Winter's Kiss, which is the 3rd and final book in the Winter's trilogy by Rutkoski. This is a YA fantasy romance series, and this follows Kestrel and Aaron. Kestrel is the daughter of a Valorian general, and Valoria has basically colonized the whole world in this fictional world, or is trying to colonize the whole world, and they took over Haran, and so Aaron is a Harani slave, because all the people who Valoria takes over become slaves. And at the beginning of the first book, Kestrel and Aaron develop a relationship, and Aaron is Kestrel's slave. Kestrel doesn't know that Aaron is part of a rebel group of Harani who are staging an uprising. And so that's basically the first book. And then the rest of the books are all sort of them reconciling their feelings for each other and also dealing with the aftermath of that uprising. I think the series got better and better as you read more and more of it. Kestrel and Aaron's relationship is at its best in this book, and you get a lot more of their relationship, which I really enjoyed because it's kind of, I was in it for the fluff. But this book also has a lot of like economic and political intrigue. And bear in mind, it's a young adult book, so it's written for young people to understand. But I did really enjoy getting, I mentioned this in my review of the second book, you get a really good bird's eye view of what is actually going on and like the military plans and why things are happening the way that they're happening in the second and third books, which you don't actually get in the first book, which I really enjoyed. And this has a fair bit of battle in it as well, but this doesn't focus on the battle. So if you like battle and fantasy, I don't know that you would like the series, but if you don't like that, I think you'll like this because I liked it. But yes, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give it away, but I did read this. I read this for Reindeer Readathon to read a book with a map because this book has a map in it. So yes, I did enjoy this book. And I gave it 4 stars, which is what I gave the whole series. I think this is a really solid series. It's not like the best thing that I've ever read, but I really enjoyed my time reading it. And then I read To All the Boys I've Loved Before and P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han. So these books, this is the first and second book in this series about Lara Jean Covey, who is a half Korean, half white American girl who just is like going to high school, doing her thing. And at the beginning of the first book, this one, she talks about how every time she's had a crush on a boy her whole life, she writes him a love letter and seals it up and puts it in this hat box that her mom gave her before her mom died. And at the beginning of the first book, somehow the letters get sent out. And she sort of deals with the aftermath of that. She sort of develops a fake dating relationship with one of the boys who gets the letter. So the boy that she does have a crush on now doesn't know she has a crush on him because it's her sister's ex-boyfriend. And then I'm sure you can guess, develops real feelings for the boy who she's fake dating, because that's how fake dating works. This was really good. I loved it. I thought it was really sweet. I will say the characters in the movie are much better than the characters in the book. The only characters in the book that I like are Lara Jean and probably Kitty. I still like Kitty. But that's like kind of about it. Lara Jean's friend is worse in the book than she is in the movie, even though she's just as absent in both. But in the book, anytime that she's present, she's kind of rude. I can't remember the girl's name. Her dad is kind of judgmental in the book and like worse, I would say, objectively. Peter is way worse in the book than he is in the movie. Her relationship with Josh is also different in the book than it is in the movie. I think I might like Josh more in the books as well. I might understand him more as a love interest. All of that said, I think the movie is better than the books, but I think the books are like sweet and cute, and if you can like sort of look past that and are just looking for a fun read, I think they're good. The second book I liked better than the second movie. I think the second movie is trash just because the second book follows a love triangle. So one of the other boys who got a letter who goes to a different school, he writes her back. And so then she starts working at this nursing home, and he also is at the nursing home. I think in the movie it's because he also volunteers there, but in the book his grandmother lives there. And so she starts sort of hanging out with him as well. And Peter's spending a lot of time with his ex-girlfriend, which is a big problem in the first book. But there's sort of a love triangle developing. And the love triangle makes much more sense in the book than it does in the film, in my opinion. I just think that in the books, it makes sense why she would develop feelings for John Ambrose McLaren, because Peter's kind of a jerk. And in the movies, Peter's very sweet all the time. And like, he doesn't always have clear communication skills, and they don't communicate well, but they're in high school, so nobody in high school communicates well. But like, I think just the way Noah Centineo made Peter in the movies, I don't see why anyone would ever leave him. Peter Kavinsky in the films is the perfect boyfriend, and I don't know why Lara Jean would ever want anything else. But that's sort of my spiel on this, and I will be reading the third one of these in January, and I'm very, very excited to get that series under my belt. Then I read The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. And this is a really well-loved book. This won a Pulitzer in 2007, I think. And several of my really good friends reached out to me when I was reading this book, and they were like, oh my god, I love that book. And I hated this. I gave it 2 stars because I see that it has literary merit, and I enjoyed some of the things that it was trying to do. But I just felt like this book had a lot of negative stereotypes of Dominican men, and the author is Dominican himself, so it just felt like he was saying it's fine to think this way about Dominican men, and I don't think that's fair. Also, a big stereotype was that Dominican men can't keep it in their pants. Dominican men have to cheat on their girlfriends and their wives, and they'll never stay true to anybody because that's just in our blood and all this stuff. And this book is purportedly about Oscar De Leon, I think is his last name, and he is a Dominican American living in New Jersey, and he is overweight and really into really nerdy things. He wants to be the Dominican Tolkien, and his family has a curse on them, and that's all you really know, and you know that he dies young. That's the gist, and it's supposed to be about his life, but the way that it's narrated, Oscar is the only character in this book that I don't feel like he got enough of the focus. This book is a lot more about other things, which is fine, but also Oscar's character doesn't really develop. He sort of starts out talking about when he's like young in high school, and he just wants a girlfriend and he wants to get laid, and that's what the book is kind of like, that's what he wants, but he can't because he's so ugly and fat and nerdy and nobody likes him. And that's his character the whole time. Nothing changes. He doesn't grow from anything, he doesn't change from anything, that's just him the whole time. And the narrator of this book, I didn't like his tone. I didn't like the narrator at all as a character. When you find out who the character is, he's just kind of just a douche. I just really didn't like him. And so that was also on me, probably. That's probably another reason I really didn't like this book, is because I didn't like the lens we were getting it through. But I did find it really interesting because you get to go back in time, and each time you get like a flashback of before the present day, it goes farther and farther back. So you get to see Oscar's sister gets in trouble, and she gets molested, it's implied, by like a family friend or somebody, and her mom after this doesn't believe her and thinks that she was the one who did something wrong, and so she has like probably PTSD and like some sort of mental breakdown and decides to just be somebody different. And you get to learn like what she went through when she wasn't in Oscar's life for part of it, and then she gets into the Dominican Republic, and you sort of learn what her life was like there. And then you follow her mom when her mom was a teenager in the Dominican Republic and what her life was like, and just the horrible things that both of these girls go through because of the men in their lives. And then you go even further back and you learn about her mom's parents, who died when her mom was young. She was orphaned, and like sort of what they went through. And it's all about this fuku, this curse that's on their family, which I thought was interesting, but I also thought it didn't focus enough on that. I don't think this book is objectively bad. I think there are just the types of things that happen in this book are the types of things that I, A, don't really want to read about, specifically character things, and B, they're the types of characters that I can't forgive. So I don't find them sympathetic. I thought every male character in this book was just bad, and I didn't think that there was anything sympathetic or redeemable about them, I guess. That was my opinion. I will say, however, this is very well written. Junot Diaz has a way with words, and I really enjoyed the Spanglish of this book, and that's something that I've heard critiqued, but I read an interview of Junot Diaz where he said that he wrote this book in Spanglish, and specifically in Dominican slang, to let the reader, the English-speaking, presumably reader, understand what it's like to be an immigrant and not understand what's going on, because he doesn't translate any of his Spanish words, any of the Spanish phrases, any of the Spanish sentences. He'll just throw a Spanish word in here and there, and he doesn't tell you what it means, so you have to pick it up from context, which is kind of the immigrant experience. And I thought that was really, really cool and very insightful. And so I did really enjoy that part of it. I just didn't like the characters in this book. And I don't have to like the characters in a book. If you have watched my channel for a while, you know that one of my favorite series of last year was The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu, and almost all of those characters are kind of bad too. But the themes and the concepts of those books are so much better to me than the themes and the concepts of this book. Also, those characters are more two-dimensional, which is why you don't really form an attachment to them, or is why I didn't. And the characters in this book are well-developed. They're just bad characters. And not bad as in like badly developed. Bad as in I didn't like them, I couldn't sympathize with them, I didn't find that they had any redeemable traits. So I think it is just a personal thing, but these are my personal reviews. Then I read the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. Sorry, this is a library copy, so it's a little shiny. This is about a family in the 60s. I guess they leave in 1959 and they go to Belgian Congo because the father is a Baptist preacher and he's going to be the new missionary there. When the family arrives, they're there for a few months and then they're told that the mission is cutting them off because the Congo is becoming a free nation. Of course, lots of stuff happens. The American government stages a coup. There's all sorts of like things that go on in this book with the Congo, but a lot of it doesn't impact this family because they're in such a small town. And this is told from the perspective of the like wife of the Baptist preacher and the like mother of this family in the present day, or like the 80s or 90s, like in the future from this book. And it's told in the future, or in the past while things are happening, from each of his 4 daughters. It's very interesting to read about each of these girls in their own voices because each of them are growing up in the Congo. So there's the youngest daughter, Ruth May, who I think is like 6. And then the older girls, there's twins who are 15. So maybe Ruth May's like 9. I don't really know. I don't know how much of an age difference they are. She's referred to as the baby, but she might be older than I think she is. But the oldest sister is 16, and then the younger 2 twins are like 14 or 15 when they get there. And Leah and Ada are the twins, and while in the womb, Leah sucked all of Ada's resources. So half of Ada's brain didn't develop, and she walks with a limp, and she has all these like physical disabilities. So a lot of her portions, which I personally like Ada's portions the best, I think. A lot of Ada's like struggle and going through life and what she talks about in her sections is A, the difficulty of being disabled in an able-bodied world, but also the enlightenment she gets from the way that the Congolese accept their disabled people. They have a neighbor whose name I can't remember now, but her feet got burned up in a fire so she can't walk. And so she walks on her hands, and her children carry her places, and her husband will carry her places, and he doesn't pick another wife, even though he technically can, because they have this like respect for the human body. So it's about these people learning that their culture isn't better than other people's cultures through the lens of obviously a white family going to another culture to try to change it. But it's sort of each of the girls coming to terms with the fact that the world isn't the way that they thought the world was, and life isn't the way that they think life is. And a lot of the book follows each of the girls learning to forgive someone in their life for the way they've wronged them, and learning to deal with the fact that they have done horrible things to each other and horrible things to other people. It's a really powerful book. It's a really moving book, and it's all building up to something like a big tragic event in all of their lives. And then it goes on for like 150 pages after the big tragic event happens, and shows how everyone in the story sort of evolved and changed and grew from that experience. I don't know. I've been trying to figure out words to describe how much I loved this book, and I just can't. But I really, really would highly recommend this book. I know this book was well researched, but I don't know how good of a view on colonialism this would give you. When I did my introduction to wanting to read this book, my TBR, that's what that's called. What am I talking about? When I did my December TBR and I talked about why I wanted to read this book, part of what I said was that this premise reminded me a lot of the premise of Chinua Achebe. Is that how you pronounce his name? I don't know if that's right. Chinua Achebe, I think, wrote Things Fall Apart. And I think I said that I thought that was a similar story. That actually is in Nigeria, but that's at the beginning of the 19th century. And it follows a Nigerian tribal chief of his tribe, I guess. I don't really remember. I haven't read that book in like 10 years. But it follows the chief and his like community and how his sort of community culture is falling apart because these white missionaries are entering. This is just a really good, this doesn't go into all of that, but it gives you a really good variety of viewpoints. And I think it can teach you a lot about humanity as a whole and just about ourselves and about how we see others. The last book that I read in the month of December was Futureface by Alex Wagner. And Alex Wagner, I think, is a journalist, and she's half Burmese and half like Irish Catholic from Iowa. This book is about her like journey to discovering her heritage, basically. So she hears a rumor from like her aunt at the dinner table one day, and she's like, you know, I think our grandparents were Jewish. And she's like, well, that's really interesting. So she goes on this wild goose chase to try to find out if she has any Ashkenazi Jew or just any sort of like Jewish heritage. And she discovers, the book calls it like, or the title sequence calls it like a, the subtitle, that's what it's called. The subtitle makes it sound like it's like some dark mystery secret thing. But really it's just like the skeletons in every family's closet, kind of. So she talks about like how her family in Burma was of one of the higher classes, or her mom was her grandparents, I guess, were the ethnic majority, and they left because of all the conflict that was happening. But they left because they had the means to leave, and sort of what that meant for Burmese society and what that's meant in her life, because her mom still uses racial slurs against Indian people. So it was really interesting to read that dynamic. And also she talks about how her dad's family, there's a story that they were able to move to Iowa and to the West because they were the United States was giving away free land, but really how free was that land? It was only able to give away that land because they pushed off the Native Americans who'd been living there for hundreds of years. And so it's just about how like in every family there are these dark histories, and when you go searching for who you are, you have to sort of accept all of the things that come along with it. I don't really have an interest in genealogy, I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't really care, but that's also something that she addressed. When you are white in America, you are considered American by default. And so she was saying that the reason it was so important to her is because she always grew up considering herself the true American, because she saw a magazine when she was little that was Time Magazine's like, in 50 years this is the future face of the world, and it looked like her. And so she always thought, well, I'm American, this is fine. And then one day she got asked where she was from by an adult, and he asked her like what's in her blood or something like that, which is a weird way to phrase it, but I think he meant like what's your ethnicity. And I thought that was really interesting that she addressed my ambivalence as like my privilege, which I've never really considered before, but that totally makes sense. So I do recommend that book if you're interested in like genealogy and family history. If you just want a straight memoir, it's got a lot of history in it. And if you just want a straight history book, it's also got it's about her personal history. I saw someone on Goodreads, there's a YA version of this book, apparently, because a lot of nonfiction is released with a YA version. I read the adult version, I think, I don't really know. But there's a YA version of this book, and the only review on Goodreads is 1 star. And it's this guy, I'm sorry, and the person, they said like, this was less about genealogy and more about this one woman's family history. And I was like, it's a memoir. That was so funny. I was like, I was gonna tell him. Anyways, yeah, that was it. That was the 11th book that I read in December. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more from me, make sure to subscribe. If you've read any of these books and want to school me on why they're good or also why you think they're bad, please let me know in the comments down below. And I will see you in the next one. Bye! Were you waiting so patiently to be on film? Come here. Were you just waiting so patiently? Oh, you crazy boy. Yes, you're crazy. You're a crazy dog. Mwah.